Welcome back, observers. We're ready to continue our book by Gordon Corman, The Hypnotist, and we're going to start at chapter 20. Jax tiptoed through the darkened apartment, his sneakers in his hand, feet barely touching the floor. Mom and Dad were not light sleepers, but there was no explaining this little excursion, so he had to make sure they remained undisturbed. The clock on the cable box read 1:12 a.m. as he let himself out the door. Gingerly shutting and locking it behind him, he took the elevator not to the lobby, but to the basement laundry room. The building's front desk staff wasn't usually nosy, but a 12-year-old venturing out in the middle of the night would have raised an eyebrow or two. He snaked through the gray cinder-block corridors, crawling on all fours past the entrance by the boiler room, where he knew there was a security camera. At the end of the hall was a heavy steel door leading to the alley. You couldn't get in that way, but you could slip out. The streets were not deserted, but it was much quieter than in the daytime. Once on the avenue, Jax flitted 3 steps up and ducked down a block of apartments that had once been 19th century tenements. The building had been redone, but the old-fashioned fire escapes were still there, the wrought iron freshly repainted. He stopped under the third house in and stood among the garbage cans, waiting. Soon, a low gonging sound told him someone was on the way down. The shadowy shape came into view, backlit by the street lamp. The tall figure reached the end of the stairway and whistled. "I'm here," Jax called softly. The ladder at the bottom of the fire escape could be lowered to street level, but that would bring out a screech of metal that would attract everyone for 30 blocks. Instead, the climber hung from the lowest rung, and Jax moved forward to catch him and ease him to the ground. At least that's the way it should have gone in theory. In reality, the two went sprawling into a pile of garbage bags. "Nice catch," Tommy growled. Jax grinned and hauled his friend upright. "Good thing garbage day isn't till tomorrow." "I already hate you, man, and this thing hasn't even started yet. Do you know what happens to me if my old man snores himself awake and checks my room?" Jax was contrite. Maybe I shouldn't have gotten you involved." "Oh, sure," Tommy retorted. "Go out there and get yourself killed. It's always about you." "It might be about nothing," Jax reminded him. "I didn't even hear it. It's more like I pulled it out of some guy's mind. It could have been a daydream, and none of it real." Tommy shrugged irritably. "I don't know what to hope for. If it's nothing, it isn't worth all the hassle, and if it's something, I'm definitely scared of it." "We won't know until we get there," Jax pointed out. "Come on, you miss a train at this hour, you've got a long wait for the next one." He rode the subway to 42nd Street and walked to the corner of 45th and 3rd. They ducked into the recessed doorway of a locksmith's shop and surveyed the intersection. It was quieter here than had been downtown. The multitudes who worked in the neighborhood rarely stuck around so late. Office buildings, banks, stores, restaurants, all closed except for a 24-hour Japanese noodle shop, which had no customers at the moment. "Maybe your ESP radar picked up some guy's takeout order," Tommy whispered. "Shh!" Jax felt a rush of charge. Hypnotism was unscientific enough the way Dr. Mako practiced it. With an entire institute studying it like they were splitting the atom, for a new bike like Jax to run off half-cocked over every random burp in his brain was pretty flaky, and to get poor Tommy mixed up in it. Incoming, Tommy annotated. It was Wilson, approaching along 3rd Avenue. He wore black jeans and a black jacket. His collar upturned, the brim of his Yankees baseball cap pulled low, but nothing could disguise the arrogance of his posture. I wasn't wrong, Jax thought to himself. Something was going down. They melted further into the doorway as Wilson passed by. Tommy mouthed the words, "Big dude." Jax nodded. "Big ego, small brain," he murmured back. Another black-clad figure crossed the street and joined Wilson. Jack recognized him instantly. "D-Ron," he whispered to Tommy. "Wilson's sidekick. A little less muscle everywhere except his head." Now, can we go home? Tommy asked hopefully. Not till we find out what they're up to. Wilson and Deron exchanged a few words and then headed west on 45th. Jax watched them disappear, raising a hand to keep Tommy from running after them. They didn't want to lose the two Hypnos, but they couldn't risk being spotted either. After a breathless 30 seconds, they scampered around the corner and took cover behind a mailbox. Wilson and Deron were about a third of the way down the long block at the door of a lit storefront. Apparently, the noodle shop wasn't the only establishment in the neighborhood open at this hour. Jax and Tommy crossed to the other side and approached at a jog, keeping low in the shelter of parked cars. There stood Wilson, Deron at his side, in what looked like conversation with an uninformed night watchman on the inside. After a moment, the guard slipped a latch and held the door wide open. He knows them, Tommy observed. I thought they were going to break in or torch the place or something. Jack shook his head. He doesn't know them, Wilson. Wilson bent him right through the glass. Whoa, Tommy was impressed. Could you do that to get us into a Knicks game? Concentrate. Jax watched the two Hypnos, looked around the store. He couldn't imagine what kind of business it might be. The lighting was dim, but bright enough to show that every inch of the floor was taken up with desks. Filing cabinets rose to the ceiling. The only empty wall space was plastered with posters. Jack squinted. Governor Zachary Schomburg for president. Vote Schomburg in the Democracy primary. We back Zach. Schomburg, Tommy commented. Isn't that the guy from North Carolina running for president? What do a couple of teenage hypnotists care about him? It came to Jax in a wave of revelation. This guy is running against Trey Douglas for the Democratic nomination. Trey Douglas is a major supporter of Sentia. Yeah, but what does this have to do with you? Tommy wondered. How can something that happens in a campaign office in the middle of the night mean that everybody can forget about you? Wilson pulled two large canvas laundry bags out of a backpack. Jack and Tommy watched as the two Hypnos began opening file drawers and dumping the contents into the sacks. While this was going on, the guard sat at his post, playing solitaire on a computer screen. Remind me never to hire that guy to guard anything I care about, Tommy commented. That's not it, Jax insisted. He's bent. He probably thinks he's alone and the office is secure. Or maybe he's been hypnotized to believe they're the cleaning crew picking up trash. Could you unhypnotize him? Tommy suggested. Get him to see what's going on right under his nose? Jack shook his head. Too risky. Wilson and Deron can get ugly. I don't want that poor guy to end up in the hospital because of us. Yeah, but you've got to look at yourself, man, Tommy insisted. What if their plan is to wreck the place and get it blamed on you? Maybe they've got something of yours to leave on the floor to frame you. Or they hypnotized the guard to say you did it. Or maybe it's got nothing to do with me, Jax countered. They must think there's something in those files that can help Trey Douglas win the election. But how does that add up to everyone can forget about Jackson Opus? They'll be heroes, Jax reasoned, and Dr. Mako will stop concentrating on me and will focus on them and what they can do for Sentia. Why don't we call the cops? Tommy suggested. Jax thought it over. He wasn't too fond of Wilson and Deron, but getting them arrested could mean trouble for Dr. Mako and Sentia. Jax resented the way the director had been stringing him along lately, but he couldn't risk the institute being shut down. It was the only organization that took hypnotism seriously, except for Axel Braintree's collection of losers. We do nothing right now, he decided. I'm a witness, and you're my backup. If it ever comes to that, we'll tell. Their bags full to bursting, Wilson and Deron headed back to the security guard. Wilson spoke to the man, who then got up and went to sit in an open, empty file drawer, his legs stuffed comfortably in front of him. As a finishing touch, Wilson ordered him to suck his thumb. Laughing uproariously, the two exited the storefront and disappeared down the block, hunched under their burdens. What a jerk, Tommy hissed. Come on, the least we can do is get that poor guy out of the file cabinet. Jack shook his head. He's a security guard. He could be armed. Tommy was confused. If he's got a gun, why didn't he pull it on the two idiots who stuck him in the drawer? You saw how it went down. He was hypnotized from the start, so re-hypnotize him. It's too risky, Jax explained. If you've been bent, the subject who's already bent, there's a chance that commands from the different hypnos will contradict each other. Like if I help tell him to remember after Wilson's told him to forget, he might try to do both. That kind of struggle can turn his mind into mush. People who have been driven crazy that way. We learned about it in the history of hypnotism. Tommy looked haunted. You know, I was kind of jealous of you because you could bamboozle people into giving you free hamburgers and stuff, but this creeps me out. I mean, the file cabinet's bad enough, but they could have made him do anything, jump off a building, or stick his head in the furnace, or chug a lug Drano. It's too much power. Jax nodded in agreement. That's why you need an outfit like Cynthia to study it and make sure it's used for good instead of, well, you see for yourself what it can be used for. Jax heard the words as they passed his lips and wondered if he even believed them anymore.